Hey guys, Perry here, just at the top of the episode to let you know that this is a conversation that I recorded with my buddy Dexter at the Merrick Inn. I didn't do the normal what we've been drinking recently up top, but we do a really cool flying blind, so I hope that you enjoy that. I will be back around at the end of the episode, though, to wrap up with some tips and bits and plugs, of course, but until then, enjoy this week's episode. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of This Is My Bourbon podcast. I'm your host, Perry. I don't know why I went full NPR there at the beginning, but oh well. Sitting here at the Merrick Inn restaurant in Lexington, Kentucky, across from an old buddy who's been on the show before, kind of on the, I'd say almost kind of on the side a little bit, because you were part of that conversation, but there were a couple of folks who stole the show during most of it.
Yeah, I'll sit to the back sometimes, but not all the time.
So this is Dexter Murray. Dexter and I have known each other since we were in like elementary school.
Yeah.
Basically played baseball together.
Yeah.
And just through the magic of bourbon, kind of reconnected, of course. And you've got a wonderful family restaurant here as well.
Thank you.
Which we'll talk about for sure. But we both kind of gave each other a blind to go through here as well, which fits in nicely with our opening segment of Flying Blind. So look at us being on brand without even really trying. I'm super pumped to get into these. And also, you've got a Four Roses single barrel sitting on the table.
Yeah, we'll definitely need to get into that.
Yeah, with my favorite recipe.
Is mine as well.
I owe it all to Iverson at OBC for even introducing me, for one, to Four Roses. But that was the first recipe I'd had.
Oh, yeah.
And it just absolutely blew my mind.
I'm trying to think of, like, the first Four Roses recipe that I had that I realized, like, oh, man, these single barrel picks, like, oh, gosh. I'm one of the weird guys. I like those OBSFs. You don't really see a lot of them much anymore. But, yeah, it's always been the OBSO, OESO for me. It's just always... There's like a, almost like on OBSO, I pick up a lot of that like Armagnac pear note on some of them. And I mean, yeah, that's what I'm all about.
I just recently, I mean, really within the past year, have developed such a love for Armagnac. I mean, just in general. Yeah. And like, and I've said it a few times now, but if all the bourbon and the rye just disappeared, it would be Armagnac. Like, that would be my
100%. 100%. That, I mean, there are some of those rums, but like...
True, yeah.
I'm taking Armagnac every day.
I don't, like, what's the other option? Absinthe? Like...
Scary there.
I can't even think twice about drinking absinthe more than once a year.
I did it only one time, and I was in Amsterdam. And
that's the perfect place for it, though.
Oh, I was actually no. I was in Brussels, and I was with my ex-girlfriend of high school family, and I had just turned 18 the day before, and we went to some bar to celebrate, and I just went up to the bar. It was like 2 shots of absinthe, and he pours them, and you know I had no idea, and before he puts the sugar cube in, you know I went floom floom, shot them both. And the guy's like waving his hands at me, and yeah, never again.
Well, my father-in-law is a pretty big absinthe guy, and I mean he doesn't drink it all the time, but if we're over there and we catch that wild hair, he'll be like, yeah, and he's got the whole thing. He's got like the scale and everything too. I mean, just super super nerdy about it, which is fine. I mean, it's fun.
Yeah.
When do you ever drink Armagnac? And like. Yeah, one time when you're in Brussels.
I mean, yeah. And then, like, with Armagnac, though, I just always feel like... Absinthe. But with Armagnac, I feel like I forget about it a lot. And then I feel like... Normally, I see that orange wax sticking up in the back. And, but I had a buddy give me one that was distilled in 93. And we were at some bottle share. And I was like, oh, that's when I was born. He, of course, it was Mosik, just goes... Well, it's yours now.
Yeah, of course.
And I was like, oh, thanks. We literally just cracked it, but...
There is somewhere out in the ether now. We did a private tasting at Mosik's house, I recorded it. I recorded it for Patreon and everything too. No idea where those files are. Like I never got around to
It
releasing.
could be a good thing, though. That could be a good thing.
It was very professional. We were all of the understanding that it was being recorded. It wasn't that big a deal. And just totally dropped the ball on it. No idea where those files are. It was a great time, though.
Oh,
we
yeah.
we had a good time. So, anyway. What on earth did you pour for me? I'm getting the feeling. I know this one's dusty. There's no way that one isn't dusty.
Oh, here, let me look at my list.
Sorry, and I'll try to be more specific. Number 1.
Yes, definitely a dusty. Actually, funny thing about that bottle was one of the people we know, fellow guitar geek, Travis Trisco, found that in his parents' house. And the story's correct. His dad's dad owned and lived in the house his whole life, and Mr. Trisco's lived in the house his whole life. So it's been like there for 50 years, and he just found it. And he's like, if anyone's supposed to have a sample of it, you're supposed to. So I was like, well, cool, okay.
Though. That's amazing. Danny taught my dad how to play guitar.
Okay.
Like
Dan's the man.
It was like right around the time that Velvet Elvis was super popular, and my dad was really starting to, want to play guitar, and he was like, "Hey Dan, can you give me lessons?" He was like, "Yeah, absolutely."
Dan's so cool. The whole Triscos are so cool.
Oh, for sure.
I lived like, I guess 2 blocks away from them. Mm-hmm. We'd go over there, and Dan had all the guitars on the wall, and I wouldn't even want to play them. He'd let you play whatever guitar it was. I mean, he'd have, he could pull out a pre-World War II Martin, and he'd be like, here, play it. I've never seen it there. I'm not saying don't go to his house looking for it, but
I have to bleep out their name every time that we've said it.
Oh, yeah. Oops.
Our bad.
Hey, that's just, what's it called? We're just, local shows will be back, so we're just, promoting.
It's all about the promotion. Yeah. What is Dan's new band? Oh, or not new band. I mean, they've been together for the past
It's like a trio that are just funky, too. Man, of course, it's blanking me. And, of course, I was, looking at it earlier today because Dan popped up on mutual friends I should know. And I was like, how are we not friends on Facebook? Yeah, those are going to throw you for a loop. Those are all way different.
Is this a Heaven Hill, Dusty?
Which one are you on?
3.
It's one of those ones. I think that I want to say you're right, but it's one of those brands that jumped around a lot.
If it's like JTS Brown or something, then it's probably...
You're close there, but not that.
Dant?
Yeah, it's Dant. Oh. You're right. So,
well, that might be National Distillers then,
It could be ND, but that at this point, I don't think it is. But, I mean, you guessed it, so I'm giving it to you. It's 74 Dant. So, I think that's... Is that Heaven Hill? Because didn't National Distillers close the Castle in 72, I believe?
Let's just look it up.
I should.
JW Dant 74?
Yeah, I should know because National Distillers is my favorite. I mean, I put it over Stitzel.
That is delicious, by the way. Yeah. I don't think I have a guess on the other 2.
I think so what I've only had 1 and 2. I think 2 is a Wilderness Trail product of some sort.
Could be.
And I think 1's like one of those 4.5 new riffs. But I've known to have been wrong. 3's, man. 3's just so dark. So I think 3's kind of like something a little older.
Oh, okay, so this was when Dant was distilled by Dant.
Okay, yeah.
So it wasn't until 93 that Heaven Hill acquired it.
Interesting, okay.
So
dang, there's only really technically 3 years of pre-fire Dant, which people...
I guess so, yeah.
I mean, Jeremy Kendrick would be the guy to ask. He's the Dant lord, in my opinion.
He's incredible. When for Whiskey Weekend last year, he brought a Dant decanter out.
He must have like a million of those because I've heard so many stories of him popping a Dant decanter or at like golf scrambles bringing like a half-gallon Dant from like 60s, just being like, oh, here, I brought a little something.
Just something to kind of throw around. I want to make sure that I didn't swap your 1 and 2 on accident.
You tell me. The funny thing is, on yours, one of them I've never had before. It's a newer release.
Okay. I did swap them, but I know what's what. So
to be honest,
Okay.
3. I want to think it's like a wild turkey pick.
It's actually Jack Daniel's.
Jeez.
It's Jack Daniel's single barrel proof.
Really?
Yeah. It's from the Nashville Whiskey House.
Okay.
And they had there was a guy who had come across a bunch of bottles. I think they were like in a store.
Man, that's
And
good though.
It's so good, man. It's only been a couple of days since I cracked it. But
I would have never. I see, because I haven't had, to be honest, any Jack Daniel's single barrels, but I've been wanting to because people always say like, "Oh man, bang for the buck."
That's
for sure.
that's the thing, is that it's become my, and I say this and I don't mean it because people have known about it, but like my favorite or greatest discovery over the past year is just how great they are. And if I can't find Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, I'm going for that. And I guess if I can't find that, I'm just stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, true.
Or have you tried the Benchmark Full Proof yet?
I haven't, but I've heard. I mean,
it's actually good.
I've heard it's the
I like
Stag
it.
Junior.
Oh, it absolutely is. 100%. It's like the leftover batch that didn't quite make it to Stag
Well, that
Junior.
makes sense because I've always heard the story of Benchmark. That's what we actually use the well here. Is
Yeah.
that it's, I've heard that some 9-year Buffalo Trace barrels that don't meet criteria get thrown in the blend. But I just can't believe kudos to them, I guess, for being able to make all these new brands and, new expressions on lower proof brands. But why don't you all just chill out and release more?
That's what we've all been talking about over the past year, for sure.
Or just like, I don't know.
I mean, I totally don't disagree with you, especially when it comes to the Weller products. And that's
It's a soft spot for me.
Yeah, and I think that's the greatest source of pain that we've all kind of dealt with over the past year.
Yeah.
Or past couple of years, really, with, CYPB coming out and then the single barrel and Full Proof, I think, I don't know. I kind of give Full Proof a pass.
I do too.
Because it's a good enough product, but everything else just kind of seems to be meh.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I'm a weeded. That's my go-to weeders,
Yeah.
especially Stitzel weeders. I like some of those old Heaven Hill weeders. I'm one of the weird guys. I cannot stand William LaRue Weller.
Really?
2016 William LaRue Weller, hated it.
Wow.
But I'm one of the weird guys. I don't think Weller should be over 120 proof. I think it needs a little bit of water, and you can throw me on a cross for that. But I think that
I don't think there's anything wrong with
114
that.
to like 117 proof, and I don't think it needs to really go over 12 years.
I mean, I've not really had a bad Full Proof yet.
Same. I've had some pretty stellar ones too.
Yeah, and I know of maybe one that Buffalo Trace dropped the ball on because it was picked and then sat in the barrel for 2 or 3 more months. And then the group got it, and
We're
they
like,
just
what is this?
They straight up said, "This is not what we picked." And of course, Sazerac's not going to refund their money, or give them another barrel. But
No.
that is
Thanks for
what it is.
playing.
Yeah, right. So one for you. It's funny you got a couple of them flipped around. One for you is a BT pick that I was on in December, with the Texas Whiskey Consortium. My buddy. And
That's a word I had not seen in years. In the last,
Consortium or Texas?
No, consortium. I haven't seen consortium in like years, and then of course in the last 2 years. That's an awesome sticker.
Oh, it's great. It's
You
great.
didn't tell me we had a short barrel. I love that.
Which we didn't know either. But 2 for you is Rifma's Story.
Okay.
Which was our first official podcast pick.
Okay. So I was
Back in-
kind of right somewhere in
Yeah.
there.
I actually do have. Nope, that's the Jack. I'll get it out for you to look at.
We might get into that bar over there at some point.
I am totally down for that.
Because there's some stuff that I haven't had, and of course I need to have the expertise to sell.
This is the best wilderness trail pick I've ever had.
Let me see that.
Hands down.
I keep telling people, like, that's the thing, too, with, like, nowadays people come up to the bar. Oh, I see you all have Blantons. Oh, look at those Wellers. I keep telling people, I'm like, no, you need to watch out for The two W's, Willet, Wilderness Trail. I think here in 3-4 years, it's going to be their game, and everyone's going to need to catch up.
What is it about Willet that is catching your eye? Because I've never really been much of a Willet fan, and they've always kind of felt like a pay-to-play distillery.
You know, and I know that, like, the Willet, you know, there's the Buffalo Trace fan group, which is kind of what most of the bourbon community is, and then the Willet group definitely seems like a group of people that's hard to get into, or it's kind of elusive, or
absolutely
out of your pay grade. But I just think that, you know, the reason that the bottles are the prices they are is because it is kind of a new thing, and that group that kind of promotes it definitely makes it seem like a premium bourbon for sure. But the one thing that blew my mind away was I went to Whiskey Pig, I guess 3 years ago or 2 years ago now, and I had that Leap of Faith 3-year rye that was picked by that Quentin Wise guy for his wedding. It was a 3-year Hoffenmeister barrel, and I forget the story of why the Hoffenmeister barrel makes it what's so special about it. I think it's a certain size and all that. I mean, I had been drinking crazy stuff all night at Whiskey Pig, and someone poured me that, and I had just had Saz 18 like maybe 20 minutes prior.
Right.
And I looked at him and was like, this is a Thomas Handy, like an old Thomas Handy, or this could be one of those vintage ryes, because it was a Willet event, you know, and it's a 3-year rye. It blew me out of the water. To the point where I saw one the other day at, I think, $500, and I seriously contemplated it because it was just. So I think that they have a lot of potential, and their new distillate, I think it'll get to a point where it's gonna be more. There'll be more of it, and then if you saw his new TTB, I think Drew posted on Instagram story, they're doing a 8-year, 107 proof like general release, and the bottle looks like it's.
I didn't know that.
I'll show you a photo of it. It's a beautiful bottle.
Is it?
It looks like a wine bottle, and it looks like one of those old, like Chateau de Philippe bottles or something like that. And I know that they take a lot of things from Napa, and, they are, I believe, French. And you could see it when you go to the distillery.
Yeah.
Let me see if I find this photo. It's really pretty bottle. And that gives me a lot of hope that it'll be more of a thing that we can reach for. But then to the other side of the coin, Wilderness Trail is definitely more easy to come across for the people. And I just think that, a lot of people just haven't had much of, because their stock's probably getting up there towards the 6-year, around there.
Well, they just put out
the 6-year weeded.
But they put out a 6-year, like 6-year, 8-month weeded pick for Derby this past week.
Okay, so
But yeah, they've got their 6-year bottled and bond, both with the weeded and the rye bourbons, which I didn't even realize that they had stock that old in the rye bourbon.
Yeah.
And somebody, I think it was in one of my group chats, they're like, "Hey, I just picked up the 6-year Wilderness Trail, and I thought the 6-year wheat was good, not great. I thought 4-year was really where it shines."
Yeah.
And they're like, "It's the 6-year rye bourbon." And I was like, "That's not possible. That's not a thing. That nobody has that yet." And he sent me a picture of the label. Absolutely lost my mind.
They just have some. I mean, Pat down there is just a wizard.
Absolutely.
And I don't mean to say that because he's got the awesome beard and all that. Like, don't. But I mean, I actually have not met him, but I like what he does, and I really appreciate how the way they did it and the way New Riff did it. Like, we're not going to put out anything under 4-year.
Yeah.
So, and I do think New Riff, too, is one of those ones that will be, depending on how they do, I still think that they'll be a big hitter in a few years, depending on how much, because, like, we could be at another, I think, we've all been talking since I got into bourbon at 21, 6 years ago, we've all talked, the bubble.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I think it's going to be another 80s situation where we get to like a glut era where there's just going to be so much of it here in a few years.
I think that we're already kind of on the cusp of that. It's being fed by these overnight bourbon brands.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's the 6 months or the 2 years or the whatever OZ Tyler was doing. before they're now Green Distillery or whatever it is.
Yeah,
But like, I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the saturation. And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, because it is offering people something different. But if it's subpar product,
it's going to be really hard to hook someone back in too. Because think of, you try some bourbon from this thing or from a distillery, and it's fairly new or very young, and it's just not very good. It's going to be a long time till you ever think to pick that back up. But and then also too, I'm curious to see as to what Castle and Key does. We actually use that restoration rye in a Manhattan cocktail on the list right now, and I sell quite a bit of it. I think in a Manhattan, it's phenomenal. Have I had it by itself yet? Not yet, but that doesn't mean that I'm not pushing it to the side.
Sure.
I just haven't had time to.
I temper your expectations with it neat.
Yeah.
Because it's aggressively fine.
So maybe you can just blurt this whole segment out, but what do you think's going to go on to that? Because I have people ask me all the time about it, and I always say the same thing. I say it's going to be a very tough job to fill. One, let's say you go hire Harlan Wheatley.
Sure.
He would never go do that. I don't think he would, but he'd never do that. Well, let's say you hire Harlan. Well, the bourbon comes out, and it's the best bourbon to ever come out. It tastes like Old Taylor from National Distillers.
Yeah.
He ain't going to get credit for it. But if the whiskey's the worst whiskey of all time, guess who gets the butt of it? He will, because he's the master distiller.
Yeah.
So I just think that they're in a tough situation, but not really, because I'm pretty sure the product, it has potential, I think.
No, I think that's the driving force behind it, is that it does need a that Jack.
Yeah, like it completely just changed on me.
I think that their ride does need a couple more years to really truly shine, but it's a double-edged sword, because who was there before was so passionate about it and remains confident and proud of the product that was made. But you're right, if they bring in one name for the brand, you've either really got to be on your game, or you've just got to completely step away from that batch and say, hey, we're doing something completely different.
Yeah, and also, too, I think they did proof that 3 year, I want to say it's like 106 or something. So there's no saying that if they bottled it down at 95 or maybe 100, that it would maybe kind of tame some of the notes and raise some of the notes of the grain that would make it stand out.
I think the original release, was like 103.7.
Okay.
And they've got single barrels that are, I think, into the 1-teens.
And I just am curious to see, too, like when some of those actual private picks will start coming out. But I believe that most of those people that bought those barrels earlier are going to I don't remember what they cost, but I would assume that they're going to let them stay as long as they can, just to get some money back on it. And not some money back, but meaning like, I know they were expensive barrels, but like you don't want to pull out and pull it a 3 year when you could say, okay, let's just do a 5 year or something like that.
Yeah. I will talk to it as much as I can, because I still know people on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, I probably should be quiet too.
No. It's so I don't think that we're out of line by saying anything that we have said. But they always said, well, not always. They have said since her departure that they don't need a master distiller, and so they're going to have like a team of master distillers, which is fine. I mean, do whatever you think is best for your distillery, but there's no face for the brand anymore. There's no real driving force or And
I think, though, that's a distillery that could probably do without that. I mean, they have the castle out front, Like, they have something, not a face, but they have something to build that brand around. And they do have a lot of history as well.
I think I agree with you, and I think if they're going to go in that direction, they would have to lean heavily on Taylor, not just as a patriarch, but also as a brand item, which they can't do unless they basically sell their entire property so that they can get that brand back from Buffalo Trace.
Yeah,
That's never going to happen. So it's again stuck between a rock and a hard place. But I think they will succeed. I think if they can maintain patience, they'll succeed as well. But I really think that they rushed it on getting these first rye bottles out the door.
They are pretty bottles, though.
I don't disagree with you.
They are pretty bottles. I'll give them that.
I'm not crazy about the label, but I think the bottle itself.
Well, yeah, neither am I. And then my complaint about them is because I'm a bar. They're sometimes at 7:30 when you're getting rushed and having to make 4 Manhattans of them. It's kind of hard to get that cap up, but
for sure,
that's the least of a complaint ever. And I never told you what you...
I was just about to ask you that.
So, number 1 is a 84 Wild Turkey 101 proof, and it says POULT. And I guess that's like the decanter it was in, because it was a decanter that he got it from.
I was going to say, it tasted a lot like Dusty Turkey.
Number 2 is William Heaven Hill 16, which I have not had, but I had the 12-year cash strength Saturday night. A gentleman that sat at my bar had a pour and decided to buy me a half ounce, and I had it after I was clocked out, of course. And then 3 was 74 Daint, whatever you want to call it.
Daint. All 3 of these truly are freaking awesome, man.
Oh, to be honest, I can go drink like a hazmat stag or something, but 101 Wild Turkey lights me up. And I'm mad that I never bought enough of Wild, not the 101s, but I don't really like saying this, and I'll probably go home and cash out so that I can get some before they go up. But those Wild Turkey Freedoms, they come in like the 7 to 13 blend. I had that and donut side by side one night, and I mean it was some big bottle share in Louisville with a bunch of guys from all over the country. And I don't know how I got invited. I followed this guy named Whiskey Grab on Instagram. And they were in Louisville, and he was posting this like Airbnb, and they had this huge bottle share. And I just messaged him, was like, oh man, that looks like a lot of fun. He's like, come on up. I mean, I had like
best part of the community.
Very old Fitzgerald 10-year. So I can't really say if the palate was all the way there, but that Freedom and donut, the donut barely won. Those Freedoms are still kind of cheapish. Well, to the market now, they're extremely cheap.
Yeah.
Like $220 ship, which is hard to beat. That's like retail of a bottle now.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, like that's almost an immediate buy.
Yeah, but now, and then like those donuts, I'll never be able to have another one, and it hurts me because I only have one left, and that's... That or the CGFs. I wish I was able to get more turkey, but I was always at that time in life, I was still like anything National Distillers Old Granddad, any Stitzelweller Old Fitz, like I have to those are my go-to. And I'm glad I did but at the same time with the market now, I don't even want to drink some of my 200 milliliters or my half Fitz.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I hate saying that because I never bought a bottle to just sit and look at. I always bought them to drink or share with people. And I think also, too, that COVID hasn't helped. I mean, there hasn't been instances where you can go meet up with, like, 20 people and drink a bunch of whiskey and not worry about, like, the repercussions of that.
See, that was something that I kind of had to come to terms with at the end of last year as my daughter was being born and as I was kind of, being reflective and thinking about what it was that had been happening, and I did realize that I had, been drinking more to cope, right? Because it's a bizarre, scary time, and that I'm about to become a dad, and so like
sounds terrifying to me.
It in many ways was, but at the same time, by the time she got here, I was just like, let's do this. You know, I didn't have any other way to express it because I've heard this almost once a week for the past maybe 5 or 6 years. You're never going to have a moment where you sit down and say, I'm ready to be a parent now. Like, it just kind of happens. And once it does, you're like, hit the ground running. Let's get at it. And afterwards, there's no turning back. And it's the best thing ever. I mean, like, I can't deny it. You know?
See, that's what everyone says, and I was literally about to ask you. So, like, is it the best thing that's ever happened to you?
100%. It's so cliche, but it's cliche for a reason.
All right, we're gonna. My girlfriend's gonna listen to this, and we're gonna just blank this whole thing out. But no, I'm just like that. I've been very, like, to be honest, my drinking during COVID actually surprisingly went down. There was actually I could say there was a good 4, maybe like a 5-month stretch where I didn't have a beer, I didn't have a whiskey.
Wow.
And it wasn't like I didn't, one day was like, okay, sober quarantine or anything. It just happened.
That's a level of coping as well.
Yeah, and also too, and it was just, I don't know. I haven't been having a lot of experiences since right now with COVID and unemployment and all that. A lot of the restaurants, we're short staffed, so I'm working all the time, and it just, people do invite you out, the small get-togethers and stuff, but by the time you're done here and you're
tired,
you're like, I don't want to go drink. Well, I do want to go drink whiskey, but I don't want to have to go talk to more people, even though they're buddies and acquaintances. It's just like, I'm spent.
More people that you're exposed to.
Yeah,
as well.
and
I mean, like, there's, of course, like, I start to get analytical about it, and I'm thinking, like, how much am I actually, doing myself any favors by?
Yeah, and I honestly, I'm not that. I'm not the big. The beginning, I was terrified. Now I'm not as so much, but
well, truth be told, once I got vaccinated, I was like, I'm not as worried about it.
And you could see
I still
that
have to be careful
as the general. You could see that as amongst the general public. I mean, working in a restaurant or it's definitely people are ready to start. Like, let's go.
No, they absolutely are.
And I'm worried about summer. I think, but at the same time, I'll take it day by day. I can't live in fear anymore longer. That was a tough year.
Understandably so. Yeah, and it's not funny, but it is something that does have to be talked about as well. We're sitting in the restaurant that y'all almost had to just give up on.
Yeah, I mean, we had to reinvent the wheel here. Like, that's the thing a lot of people don't understand is, we were dropped down to 33%, and then we were completely shut down, and then we had to start as a complete to-go restaurant, which in 40-something years, we've never done that. And, we did get a break here and there. I had our Weller Foolproof Barrel come in during COVID. And that helped one night carry. That was a crazy night here. And, we've had some things. I had that Eagle Rare Barrel
I was just about to say.
Helped and also caused a little stir. But,
That's not, we don't have to talk about that right now.
Yeah, no. It's all good.
That was not your fault.
No. And I've now learned how to word post better now. So that's good. But, yeah, it's been very weird. And, I mean, we're definitely towards the end of it, and we're definitely, the PPP definitely saved us for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't understand that. I'm not handle that side of the business my head would explode if I started looking at numbers and all that. But, yeah, and it's weird. Like, here we are Monday night, which is normally has always been half price wine night, prime rib night. Well, we've closed down on Mondays just to, kind of put some more money in the checking account and just, make it to the whole goal when this was all happening was to make it to this spring and this summer.
And sure enough.
And,
it's spring.
It's spring. We've made it, and luckily it's just, I'm just curious. And you can see at every fast food place it's affected.
For sure.
Saturday night, I left here at 12:45 and didn't eat anything here for some reason not. And so I was like, I'll go to McDonald's. Well, there's 30 cars in the thing, and it's probably because they have 2 people working.
Yeah.
Well, then I was like, all right, we'll go to Rally's. no, there's 10 people out front and 10 cars. I was like, all right, well, the worst of the worst, we'll go to Taco Bell. They were in Tates Creek Center, parked across the street into the bank parking lot. The line was so long. So I was like, all right, a PB&J at home sounds delicious. So I don't know. And we don't have to really talk about it anymore. We can go back to whiskey. But,
yeah, of course.
I'm just glad that for the most part it's not over, but it's almost over.
Well, and I mean, there were a lot of people who came out in support of you all, of course, during everything. And, you know,
we were really blessed. I mean, we have a lot of really good customers and people. I won't say his name, and he's actually the guy that gifted us the 74 dance sample. Guy that's he's not from Kentucky, he's from Minnesota. He's bought, I think, about $500 worth of gift cards.
that's awesome.
He's never been here. Has never just us through the boards, and we've talked over we've sent each other long 2-minute messages on Facebook Messenger, and like that's it. And I was up in Minnesota for my girlfriend's grandmother's birthday, and it was 10 minutes from his house. He just came, dropped off a bag of like 74 Dant, was like CGF samples and all this stuff. Never met the guy before. And I mean, just people like that, and people that were picking up, you know, they were picking up like fried chicken orders and not even picking up the food and tipping. And they would call and say, hey, if one of the servers wants to take the food home, take it. So we were really blessed, and, you know, I get it from my dad, and he gets it from his grandparents who started it. We would have shut the doors before we would have ever asked anyone like a GoFundMe or whatever.
Yeah.
And there were days where we kind of just thought about, it was a good run.
Yeah.
And, you know, I give it to hats off to my dad. He's still the main man here and runs the show. And I know some people think that I have some saying that. I don't well, I do have some, but he's the reason. I mean, he kind of amazed me just of how he completely rewrote the wheel. And, you know, we built this patio bar, and he never really, you know, I looked at one point, I just was like, maybe I'll go be a mailman. Like, I'm done with this. And he never stopped, kept looking, and he's been here, started when he was 12. He's 61 now. So, I mean, he could have easily been like Pontius Pilate and wiped his hands, but we're still here, so.
That's all that matters, man.
And I hope we'll be here a lot longer, so.
Yeah.
It's fun, and now it's like we're going to get back to kind of doing more. What I've been trying to focus on is doing more like bourbon dinners like I used to, which was a huge thing. And I just can't believe I look back at like who we had here, like Dixon, Jimmy, Russell, and all them. So we're going to start doing that, and, you know, we're going to get – last year kind of screwed us with barrel picks. It was hard to get some. But this year I've already got a few planned out. I'm trying to get more and more, but we're also trying to do more for like charity stuff just because it's – you could go pick a barrel. I mean, we get allocated it, but I'd rather drink and share it with someone.
Yeah, exactly.
And like help people than just, you know, just buy the barrel and sell it the regular way.
Yeah.
So I have a few things up the sleeve on that end, but it's also just hard because a lot of the distillery brands and a lot of their allocations, they've kind of, they don't love Kentucky really anymore.
You talked about like even Kentucky brands.
Oh yeah. Just allocations for like, you know, like a certain brand cut allocation for Kentucky completely. And I've heard to the effect of like 38%. And I don't know where that came from. That's not from someone on that side. That's just the rumor I've heard on like the guys on Twitter that, you know, put out random stuff that from sometimes time to time, they're pretty true on their stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's hard. And then it's also hard with some of the big distilleries. You're kind of locked in on an allocation. Like you can't, like, let's say I'm allocated an Eagle Rare barrel. Well, I'd love a Blanton's barrel or any other type of barrel. Well, it's like, well, you picked an Eagle Rare 3 years ago. You're going to keep getting an Eagle Rare, which at this, I'm not going to complain, but it'd be nice for some variety. But like a place like Buffalo Trace, it's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
You're going to buy what they have or someone else is going to buy it.
we can kind of roll our eyes, but I mean, Bernie Lubbers means it when he says it's a bourbon industry, not a bourbon charity.
Oh, 100%.
You know, and like I get it. I get it
too, but it stinks when you see like a place. Okay, the private barrel program shut down until 2022. Well, then you see some guys picking barrels and they're not associated to a restaurant or a liquor store or anything, and you're just like, well, how's that work? We've been supporting for years, but yeah.
I mean, it's, and I try to be, dude, this Four Roses is legit. But it is one of the more frustrating parts that you do realize that. And
I know that it's not the people that are representing like our state. It's not them saying it. It's the heads.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I understand. It's you have the market here. I know you want to get markets in other states, and
Well, it's one of the reasons that I kind of, when it was first announced, gave it a pass. But then the longer that it's gone on, I've not understood why it hasn't looped back around. But well, two products from them. But when Heaven Hill did Elijah Craig Rye, when they first announced that, was that the beginning of last year, end of 2019?
Yeah, that was a while ago, I feel like.
So they had said that they were only going to do it in select markets, and it turned out that it was to focus on markets that were mostly cocktail driven, right? I was like, okay, that's fine. That means it'll make its way back here.
Makes sense.
And it has. I mean, we can now find it on shelves.
Yeah.
It's not the easiest thing in the world to pick up,
yeah.
but it's around. And then the other one is when they did away with the bottled and bond 6-year in favor of upping the price by 300% and tacking on 1 year, excuse me. And the rumor was always the same thing. It's going to go to different markets and it's going to make its way back to Kentucky eventually.
Because, I feel like they could also say, too, like, oh, well, if it doesn't do well in this market, we'll bring it right back to Kentucky.
Yeah. But it sells out in California immediately.
And I would say that they could probably get a higher MSRP out there.
Oh, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
I don't blame them. And it's hard for me to ever hate on Heaven Hills, especially being family-owned, Kentucky, I'm right kind of in that wheelhouse.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't know. It's just kind of weird. I would always think that a Kentucky distillery would always want to show love to Kentucky, especially because, in the 90s and the early 2000s, we were the ones we were on the back of it before everyone else was on the back of it. But it is what it is. And
and I mean,
it'll come back eventually.
It will, and there's only so much that we can, wax poetic about the past with as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's a business model that seems to have proven true for them. And, I mean, Kentucky's not the only place that bourbon is popular anymore.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, it's not even just the U.S. It's a global thing at this point.
And I would assume that, countries like Japan or other overseas countries are like, look, we'll buy it and we'll pay $20 more for it a bottle or something.
I think...
Or can they not? I assume they probably can't do that.
I think that's generally the rule of thumb. But, India is the most consuming whiskey country on the planet.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. There's 1-something billion.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would say that that's probably whiskey, in Scotch, Irish whiskey, not just bourbon whiskey.
Well, yeah,
American
of course.
whiskey,
but I mean, I don't think that there's anything saying that bourbon shouldn't be lumped in with that.
No, it should be. I just think too, we all knew bourbon was going to be next, especially when the Japanese whiskeys started getting really the stocks were really short. It's because Scotch is always one of those markets that you're not going to get the average person that's wanting a Blanton's or an Eagle Rare. They're not going to, not a week later, they're going to be like, a Macallan 18 sounds wonderful. And that's a market that also prices you got to be kind of angry, old, and rich to be in the Scotch, in my opinion.
Yeah. No.
On some, but I'm also not a Scotch guy. That's the peat, something I can't do.
I've come around to Scotch. I love single malt whiskeys. I think they're spectacular. I wouldn't say I fully enjoy peated Scotch. I think I tolerate it more than anything. But it's a nice alternative every now and then for me to drink Scotch. But otherwise, just give me Turkey 101. You know?
Yeah.
Give me rare breed.
Yeah, seriously. So I'll ask you this. Is rare breed gonna... I've heard rumors that, they're doing single barrels of rare breed. And then I'm like, wait, how are they doing single barrels of rare breed if it's a blend? And then I saw, like, Rare Bird said, how are they doing... he said it's a blend. They're not doing single barrels of it. But then I've heard for some sources, no, it's happening.
I personally have not heard anything that Dave Jennings hasn't heard. And I don't think that will ever be the case, of course. But...
he knows.
Well, of course, yeah. But... I think that Turkey is, and this is a separate conversation as well, but Turkey is so behind on the trends that it's possible that rare breed picks didn't even cross their mind until recently.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I like that about Turkey. That's why I think Turkey is kind of this cult thing, is because they don't really... They release what they want to release and what Jimmy and Eddie think's good, which 99.9% of the time is right. Except for the time Eddie slapped me in the back of the head. That was not funny. We were on a barrel pick, and I was like, man,
Is that the pick that you went on where you had to show your ID?
No, that
was that a Four Roses
That
pick?
was actually, that was Four Roses, and
that
was
was
Al
Al
Young
Young. Yeah,
ID'd me on the pick, and I was like, I love that. But no, Eddie, I said, like, man, this tastes like bubble gum. And he just went, what? And he was like, if Jimmy heard you say that, he would have told you to leave. And I was like, why? He goes, it's vanilla, it's caramel, that's it. And I was like, I will just keep my mouth quiet the rest of the day.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I do love that kind of the guy trying to catch up, always a couple yards behind everybody else aspect of Turkey. But I do think that they need, and maybe it's this Russell's 13 year that's about to come out.
I'm excited about that.
I can't wait, dude. It's like, what, $70 a bottle?
Yeah, but we say that, but then how many people lost their mind for the last 17 year they did? Which we didn't even get any here, and I'm so upset about.
Have you tried it?
Oh, yeah, it's phenomenal.
I might give you the rest of my bottle.
Oh, okay, sure. Cool.
I don't think it opened up well.
I had it next to some Dusties, too, Turkey. I think I had it next to like a 78 101. So that could have also played into it, because 101, like, it treats me like 170, like Everclear. Like, I don't know what it is about old one, like, I just can't do it. But you give me this William Hepburn Hill 16 year at cask, and I'm like, that drinks like it's 100 proof or something.
And that William Hepburn Hill was hot on the first sip, but afterwards it just cleared itself right
have
up.
Some of that, because I haven't had it. And we had that 12 year. I have a 12 year. It's like 1 something proof, and then I also have a 14 year that's cut at like 115 on the bar. So I had that 12 year, and but no, there's one over there that keeps staring at me really bad.
Go grab it.
This is my favorite of all time. Not all time. Okay, so this might not be my favorite of all time, but
Close enough.
yeah, this and Saz 18 are the only bottles I think like.
So what you pulled out was Eagle Rare 17.
Eagle Rare 17, that first year, 2019, where they put it back to the original 100.
Back to 101?
101. I mean,
I haven't had it in a minute. I got the sample pack from Buffalo Trace.
must be nice.
Yeah, that was one of those moments where I was like, hey, we kind of matter a little bit.
Mama, I made it.
Yeah, exactly. And it was, I had high hopes for it. And I think that when I stacked it up against everything else that came out in 2019.
19 was a good year.
19 was a really good year. it just kind of fell flat against everything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to, if you're putting it up against, I mean, I don't like William LaRue, but if you're putting it up against William LaRue and Stagg, and depending on what order you have it in, yeah, it might not stand out. But I was also a really big fan of all the 90 proof stuff.
I don't think I had anything before 101.
I mean, they've always been super vanilla bombs, like super vanilla.
Yeah.
Really, not like caramel. I mean, caramel is a big note, but like I get like Werther's caramel, kind of like a hard caramel candy more than like the fudgy caramel. But
as you were saying that, I started tasting it, but I was getting over the hump of that big, like chocolate covered cherry note.
Yeah,
that is always on Eagle Rare. Like at the very
and
tip
these
of the palate.
two, I believe, because like I have a 3-pack case, and they were the 2020, not this year's, maybe last year's. I had a 3. I just had I didn't get 3 of them. I wish I did, but I had the box. And they say Old Prentice Distillery DSP 113 on it. So I believe that all these are probably Old Prentice ones that they probably still tank, even though I've seen like that Double Eagle that was still in a barrel, and they keep. But
really?
But they keep them in that. I don't guess I'm not really.
No, I know it's the
last drop or whatever.
Yeah. The climate control.
So I mean,
area.
everyone's seen that, so I guess it's not like a secret.
It's not a secret anymore.
But they had some Ancient Age in there that was from Ancient Age Distillery. So I wonder how long it ages in there, because we all know the SAS 18 they tank, and I've never seen where these tanks are. But the Old Prentice, I remember I've had a 375 with the 10-year neck label, Old Prentice 10-year. And I was at some Christmas party, and this is like 6 years ago, and I brought it. And I poured it into like a red Solo cup because there was nothing else. And I took a sip, and I thought someone had put grenadine in it. It was so cherry sweet. And I went to at some girl's house and grabbed a glass, and of course it had like stickers all over this glass. It was not a Glencairn at all. And I tried it again, and it tasted like straight up roses, grenadine, and bourbon. And so I think I just gave it to someone at the party and was like, hey, here's your flask for the night. Have a good night.
Oh, my gosh.
And I see where you get that, because some of those, and I have had other store picks with the neck tags, and they're just really cherry, but not as cherry as some of those, I feel like those Elijah Craig age-stated used to be. Not the pre-fire stuff.
Snap, yeah.
But that Stagg Jr., those EC12s when they were age-stated, and I'll go ahead and say Weller 12. Those are what put me into bourbon. And then someone gave me a taste of, it was 81, 86 proof Old Grandad. And that's when I was like, all right, that's okay.
How much of that, and I kind of shooting from the hip here, but how much of that at that point do you feel like we took for granted? And then look back at it now and we're like, I wish I had just kind of savored that a little bit more. Because if I think about that every now and then, it kind of puts me through my paces, and then I have to kind of step back and take the Freddie Johnson approach, that there's always going to be more good whiskey.
I mean, there's been days, especially now with how the market is, and it changes every day, that I look and I'm like, oh, man, I'm so mad. But you can't be. I mean, to be honest, there were so many things that I just stumbled across that has to outweigh it. I try to look at it positive. But I got real lucky with a lot of stuff. Yeah. And I've also always made it, especially on the stuff I get really lucky on, I'm going to share it. We're going to drink it.
Absolutely.
And,
I'll tell a very quick story about that, and I told it on my live stream this past week, but I was talking with Dixon right before, it was like a couple weeks before he announced that he was leaving. And I have a couple of plans that, you know what? That's not true at all. It was the day that he announced that he was leaving. And I called him 5 minutes after I found out, just so I could process it and everything. and we had talked about him sending me a sample of Al Batch 10 for the podcast. Sure enough, the guy sends me an entire bottle.
That's Dixon. He's one of the best.
That is Dixon to a T, though.
I haven't talked. I was gonna reach out to him the other day, but I also was like, I can't imagine how many message requests he has on Instagram, and so I was like, I won't reach out. I probably will, just because. The funny thing is like my family would go to my mom's side of the family would go to the Beaumont Inn as their vacation every summer.
Wow. That's incredible.
So my mom's the oldest of 7. So they didn't have a ton of money.
Yeah.
And my grandparents are so into, like the 1800s, 1700s. So Beaumont obviously just makes sense. So like I grew up going down to the Beaumont for a weekend in the summer, and it would always be when there was the Harrodsburg Fair down there.
Oh, that's cool.
And man, I love Dixon, and I hope he does well. And I mean, Beaumont Inn's a special place, and being, I guess, an innkeeper, if you want to call it, but we don't have rooms upstairs at all. I feel for him, but I mean, the legacy that his family's made with the Beaumont, and that legacy is going to last another hundreds of years. It's pretty awesome. And so I think whatever he does, he's going to just knock it out of the park. And I don't think anyone should be like worried or sad for him. I think he's going to just come out swinging hard.
Well, he's not terribly upset about it either.
No, I'd say not.
And I'm not, I can't speak to too much of it.
Same.
But I mean, he's looking at greener pastures ahead of him.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and then to be honest too, like what he did for Kentucky Al, I mean, I remember when Kentucky Al was first coming out, we all were like, oh, he doesn't have an age statement on it and stuff. But then the first person that was, saying bad things tried it and was like, oh.
Yeah, have you actually tried it?
My favorite story about him is the story about Jim Rutledge.
When he first brought out
When he first brought him the barrels, and Jim was like, these are awful. Yeah. And then, like, I guess a year or so later, for how the story goes, he brought these blends to him, and Jim was like, this stuff's great. And Dixon was like, it's the same stuff I tasted you on. And Jim was like, well, you're a master blender. And coming from Jim, that's obviously awesome.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we did a dinner with him, and it was batch... I think it was like batch 2, batch 4, batch 5, and 6 had just come out.
That year where he released like
3, 4, 5 had all like kind of just come out, and I had stockpiled. Like I remember finding 3, 4, and 5 at a liquor store downtown, on campus actually, and they had 2 of each, and I was like, I'll take them all. And back then that was, and
it wasn't much.
Oh, it was like because it was one of those stores that. They made their money off of it.
Well, sure.
But, the retail then was still like $150. So
yeah.
I remember being like, oh, don't look at my checking account. Don't look at my checking account. But we did that dinner with him, and we had the batch 4. And that next week was when they all skyrocketed. I had bought another batch 4 for the tasting so that we had enough to do it bigger. I think I paid like $350 for it. And that was the secondary. Well, then... I tried to buy another one after tasting it here and realizing it was weeded. I was like, oh, I got to have that. They were $1,200. So, but I mean.
What's interesting to me about Kentucky Al is that there is virtually no market for it on secondary now.
Really?
Oh, it's
has it all like
dead in the water.
And it's give me some batch 4 now.
But there's just no interest in it. Like, if somebody throws up a bottle for a Fireball, never gains traction.
Interesting. Well, I guess I haven't been paying attention to that. But I mean, and then to be honest, like that batch 1 rye was phenomenal. Batch 2 was good, but it was also very hard to compete with that batch 1.
Absolutely.
Which is probably, to be honest, an initial rye whiskey release for some place. It's got to go up in top 2.
Yeah.
And I can't really think of another one, to be honest. Unless it's Wild Turkey 13-year. Is it 13-year rye or is it bourbon?
Bourbon.
I wish it was rye. Where's all the rye at? I know people got rye.
I think that within the next couple of years we're going to see Bruce just come out swinging.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's no way that Jimmy has much left in the tank at this point.
Yeah, Bruce used to kick. So he lived with a buddy of mine in high school, and that's all I'll say. Nothing bad happened. But he used to kick my butt in Dragon Ball Z on PlayStation 2. And you know what's funny is I knew him as Bruce Russell, and there was always Wild Turkey at the house. And it wasn't until like a year ago, and this was like 9-10 years ago when he lived with a buddy of mine, that I saw him. I saw him in like an ad of something, and I Instagrammed him. Was like, what? He's like, yeah, like Eddie's my dad, and I was like, makes so much sense now.
That's such
like,
a weird realization to come to after all those years.
Had no clue, but like there was always Russell's Reserve, and I always just thought that it was Russell's Reserve and turkey at the house because his last name's Russell. So like,
Sure.
I'm gonna drink Russell's Reserve, not knowing that like, no, my last name's on the bottle. But he's awesome, and yeah, I like where he definitely seems more interested in. I mean, he's Russell's rye guy. I mean, he's.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, and then that Jefferson's Cognac rye, we just did that pick 2 weeks ago. That's 6-year rye. But I just don't know where. There's got to be some older stock somewhere.
I think that there is, and I think
they just blended into stuff,
which is just a shame.
It is a shame. It is.
Well,
a shame.
okay, you know what? I think that what we probably have seen is with the advent of rare breed rye, that a lot of bottles or a lot of barrels went into that, and I don't have a problem with it. Rare breed rye is delicious.
It is good. Do they still make Forbidden, or is that kind of like
Forgiven?
Yeah, Forgiven.
I don't think so, because I think that the gimmick side of it ran its course so quickly because it was supposed to be an accident.
Yeah, and then it's like
with heavy air quotes, an accident.
Yeah,
but even still, and it's not like 101 rye and 81 rye are bad products.
No, I love the 101 rye,
I do
especially
too.
for a cocktail. I think because like especially because when you add it to a cocktail, you bring it down more to some, on its own. It's definitely like it's just like 101 bourbon. It's gonna light you up.
Yeah.
But like that's as we're drinking this, like that was my biggest thing for this Eagle Rare 17. Why is it gotta be 90 proof? I don't care if you only sell 1,000 bottles. Let's raise it up.
I think that there was a rumor going around recently that standard Eagle Rare 10-year was going to be 101 again.
Oh, I kind of honestly hope not.
Don't take my word for that, by the way. I don't want anybody to come with torches and pitchforks.
If you think Eagle Rare is hard to find now, oh gosh.
It would cut it, I mean...
But think of Saz 18 at like Bottle and Bond. I would literally...
Not mad about that.
I would fight. I'd get in the ring with Floyd Mayweather for a bottle of Eagle or Saz 18 at 100. To be honest, I'd get in the ring with Floyd and Mike Tyson if you'd give me a bottle before I die, buy both of them, of Saz 18 at cask.
So your next trajectory is to basically be the Paul brothers?
I mean, no. I will say, though, those kids are like, I can't stand them, but they are absolutely like marketing whiz kids.
They're monsters.
Especially the guy, how he does Pokemon. He gets all this money to open up packs. He also owns all this stock in PSA. So now it's just...
It's so frustrating because I feel like we are seeing in real time happen to Pokemon cards.
We're watching our like childhood blow up, and I think that's what makes us most mad about it is we're watching the Pauls like monetize it when it's like, I could do that.
Yeah, no, right? But we don't have the influence behind it.
No.
But we're also seeing in real time what happened to the bourbon market over many years. Instead, it's happened over a few months.
Yeah, because I mean, to be honest, those when like Kentucky Owl was like the first few batches, there were some bottles that jumped up like crazy, but it wasn't like how they'd start out the gate nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, remember when Booker's Rye came out? People were paying what? Like, wouldn't want to drop over $600?
Honestly, I don't have
retail
that.
was super high. I think it was like $300.
Was it really?
It was worth every penny.
Well, I mean, I totally agree with you. It's
I
one
hope
of the
they
best
say
whiskeys
they are
I've
going to
ever had.
re-release. The rumors they say
That was what was going around. Yeah,
but then they also don't know what actually the recipe was. But man, that's still up there. and top 10 for me. But that's the thing nowadays is, you know, I've never called myself, but a lot of people, I guess, know me now as like a dusty guy. Well, it's kind of hard to be a dusty guy nowadays because it's too expensive.
Yeah.
But if I get, you know, I scored a stag this year, I'll probably try to see if I can get a
Stag senior?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll hopefully try to see if I can get some time at Dusty out of it. Just because, and I hate saying this too, if I don't drink that old granddad, which I'm most likely going to drink it, I can then next week that could be your lottery ticket.
Yeah.
And then I can go get me 3 more stags and then be like, oh, cool. Like, I really kind of wanted to drink. But I hate looking at it like that. I just want to.
Yeah, and you have to be.
But that's how. Is that what happened with COVID? Have you noticed, like, in the last month last year, the general public's really into, like, stocks or, like, EFT or like whatever it is,
yeah.
like making money, like it's like the stock market or flipping shoes, flipping bourbon. I think that COVID had a direct effect of like people being like, well, I'm on unemployment.
Yeah.
Let's find and it also could be people that have looked at the hobby from an out for so long. Finally, we're like, look, this is the time to get in.
That's where I was coming.
I have nothing better to do.
Yeah.
Let's start a bourbon TikTok. Oh, like
everybody's doing it. I'm a partner with TikTok now. How about that?
Really?
No, not me. I'm just. That's just how it.
I was on TikTok last night and I saw that guy with the Rick House in his basement that I've been seeing on Facebook.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, what? Get this off my TikTok. Like, this is not what I watch TikTok for.
I don't want to feel a little bit.
I don't
want
to be in bourbon TikTok. Like, I don't even want that to be a thing.
I've got a TikTok. It's under the podcast name.
Hey,
but I don't ever really do. Like 2 out of the 3 TikToks I've posted have been of my daughter. Like, and even then, it's like minimum effort.
My girlfriend's, she's 23, so she's more like not over 25 and a grumpy like all the kids say on that app. But
she fall into Gen Z then?
I think so. She just turned 23 like last week.
Okay.
So yeah, probably. But she wants me to do one of those TikToks like, this is my first one. This is my favorite one of like bottles of bourbon. And I'm like, no, I don't
want to do that.
I don't know.
I want to.
I do.
It feels kind of gross, doesn't it?
Yeah,
like
it does.
It. I think that's why so many of us will never cross into influencer territory because we've got a soul.
Talking of Dusties, let me go get one.
So we're at the point of the night where you've decided to bring out the good stuff.
Yeah, I mean we've been doing real well, but so this old granddad is actually and it used to have so much dust on it, and I left all I had found a case of these in a barn. 2 of them were bad. The other 10 were perfect. This had so much dust on it, and I had poured it in one of the bartenders he doesn't work here anymore, not because I fired him after this, but he went on to bigger and better things or whatever.
Sure.
He took a wet rag and wiped all the dust off, and I was like, dude, no. But this is the last one of that case. It's a 75, 86 proof old granddad. And I'm one of those weird guys that likes the 86 proof over the bottled and bond Dusties. And I think that was because when I was in the Dusty market buying 86 proof, you could normally get
nobody else is buying it.
2 to 3 of a bottled and bond.
Yeah.
But I also feel like a lot of those bottled and bonds kind of are lackluster. Some of them are absolutely amazing, but some kind of proof down. And the 86 proofs I feel like are already so proof down that they don't really evaporate a lot of proof.
Yeah.
And if they do, they're not going down. They'll go to maybe 80. But like I've had some bottled and bonds that I'm like, this could have gone down to like 89 or 90. But then we have that. Then we have this J.W. Dant 10-year-old old style whiskey. So it says it's bottled by the Dant Distillery Company. But then it says a division of Shenley, Pennsylvania, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, and Fresno, California.
What?
Well, you look on the side of it, it's 86 proof 10-year Dant. It says it's distilled in Indiana. So it's distilled at the old Seagram's plant.
Wow.
Yeah. Tell me how that makes any sense. I just didn't know that they distilled at MGP or at Seagram's at that point.
Charcoal perfected. Sure. I love that old like flowery language that they used to put on.
And I've seen one more bottle that looks like that, but it's like a silver label, and it's not 10-year. And I don't think that does it say bourbon on that label, or is it just say whiskey?
Just says whiskey.
Yeah. So that's the other weird thing about that. I didn't know J.W. Dant made I mean, I've seen like the old style whiskey that's kind of more like a gold label, but they don't brand it as like J.W. Dant mostly.
Right. What's do you know the actual year?
I think it's a 69. I think that's what I have it listed on the list as, is a 69.
You could probably fool anybody.
I haven't had anyone
challenge
me, and I'm not the type of person that's gonna be like, oh, don't challenge me.
Yeah,
like,
you're wrong.
Challenge me. I mean, the bottle date on it, it's
got 60 and 62 on it.
Yeah, so it could be earlier, but I just don't. In the tax strip, though, I've kind of lost the sense of. I used to know, like, oh, it's this series tax strip, but I've kind of now. The main thing I care about are DSP numbers and UPC codes.
Right.
Because for the longest time, that's the only way I knew what old granddad to buy in these liquor stores.
Right.
Was like, oh, if it's 86529, it's what we want. That's National Distillers, which is absolutely crazy. And going in, I remember being like young, like 21, going into liquor stores in the middle of like South Dakota when I'd go out to visit Colorado, and I used to live out there. Be like, yeah, do you have anything with this barcode 86529? Thinking like they would know. But I did find a guy this old granddad actually we're drinking. I was in Omaha, Nebraska, and I walked into some liquor store, and they had a big 1-gallon Seagram 7, big old tax strip sealed. And I was like, this is a good sign.
Yeah.
And I asked the guys, like, do you have any more stuff with tax stamps or whatever? He says no. And I'm like, okay. Have a good day. He says, well, my dad closed a liquor store in 1978. Oh. And I'm like, where's your dad? And he's like, well, he's asleep. It's like 7:30 at night. I'm like, well, I'm supposed to be leaving to continue on to Denver. He's like, well, he wakes up at 5 in the morning. If you want to meet me at his house at 6 in the morning tomorrow, like, we'll see what he has. It's all in his basement. So I tell my girlfriend at the time, I'm like, well, we're spending the night in Omaha, Nebraska. I wake up the next morning and I go over there. He has like 45 cases of just decanters, bottles, everything. And he's like, I'm like, so first thing first, I'm like, what do you want for it all? He's like, well, let's start opening them up. I don't know what's in them. Bunch of boxes were all like 50 milliliters. Mostly of them were shooters, 200 milliliters, stuff like that. And it wasn't just all whiskey. It was like cream to mint, everything.
Sure.
Well, then we open up a box, and it's like all Stitzel-Weller 200, 375s, 50 milliliters. And I have to hide it. Like, and look, I've learned, and this was towards the end of Dusty hunting.
Yeah.
I knew, like, I got to take care of this guy. Like, this is probably the last score I'll ever have. Well, he starts telling me, well, those back then were like $2.55, I think, a piece, or they were $4 a piece. So how about we'll charge you $5 a piece for those, and we'll do $10 a piece for those. And I'm like, okay, it's a little expensive, but keep going. And we get to this one case, and it had a case of 77 Antique in it, and I just lost it. So we agreed on a price. I go and rent a U-Haul to fit it all in because it didn't fit in my Golf at the time. And I drove it back. My girlfriend drives my car to Denver. And I bought a one-way ticket to Denver from Lexington. And, that was like...
That's crazy, man.
Yeah. Once I loaded up my car, I came back. I went back in there and gave him an extra $1,000. And the guy was like, stop. I don't want this. And I literally was about to have to like leave it and run out the door. Yeah. And he finally took it, but yeah, like that's a lot of the stuff we did put on the bar, like a lot of it. Some of the stuff I had to keep for myself.
Yeah,
but
of course.
I've always been to all the Dusties. I don't have anything higher than $60. And the $60 thing I have is Jefferson's 18 Presidential, which I probably won't have any more in a few weeks because not many people know I have that on the list, but it's, as I tell people that come up here, like, what's your favorite bottle? I'm like, look, I'm going to say 80s Old Granddad, but that's not realistic. It's all fermented corn. We should just drink it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a lot easier to ask somebody what they like and then, kind of snake your way through the...
Yeah, figure out what they like. But
exactly. This is phenomenal, though.
Oh, dude. Even at 86 proof, it does have... I like the Old Granddads more than I like the Old Taylors from this era. Mm-hmm. Just because they hold up a little bit better. Some of those Old Taylors get like that, your grandma's wet basement too much. This one has that note, but it also... I've always gotten like really tanned leather, and like if you've ever had to eat, which is a miserable thing to eat, like the dehydrated apricot.
Fruit leather?
I get like apricot out of it, and I just love those 86 proof Old Granddads. But I do like the 114s too. the bottled and bonds, they just don't really. Some of them do, like the late 80s ones do it for me, but at a what's it called, when bachelor party of a gentleman that we know, we cracked open one of those 69 Old Fitz gallons, which we probably shouldn't have cracked. And he was a serviceman, so I brought a 40 to 44 Old Granddad bottled and bond. It was awful. It was so awful. And I probably shouldn't have drank it because it was like, you'll never see another World War II bottled and bond. And I think I sold the other one to someone that was a service guy just because I was like, you'll enjoy it more than I will.
I remember we were putting stickers on a pick, and what was that you broke out that was so...
Oh, that I got sick on?
That had turned, yeah.
So same guy that provided that gallon provided that. It was a Wildlife, I think it was a 71 86.8 Old Fitz Prime decanter.
Right.
And with those old stuff, the 86 proof, like especially Old Taylor, they get cloudy. And that doesn't mean anything. You can cheesecloth it. Yeah. You could coffee filter it. And I always say the rule of thumb is an 86 proof or an 80 proof cloudy, it's not the worst thing. It's just there's not enough ethanol in it.
Yeah.
But if you see 100 proof that's cloudy, run. But yeah, was it a new riff pick? I think it was the new riff pick or one of the ones. And
that sounds right.
That was miserable, man.
Having that,
not what it was because I knew as soon as I tasted it, I was like,
you were gonna get sick.
I'm not gonna get sick in 2 minutes. I'm gonna be sick for like 2 days,
yeah.
And I was. And there's nothing worse than having to go relieve yourself in the back of a liquor store bathroom that's like the size of a broom closet, and just sitting there being like, well. Now I have to tell everyone that this is what killed me is some Old Fitz. Like, no. And they're all going to be like, because, most people think Old Fitz, they're like, he died off a bottom shelf whiskey? Like, what? But, yeah, that was pretty miserable. So, like, I have a gallon of an 86 proof Old Fitz that I really want to open, but I'm also really scared. I'd rather, at that point, it's like, I'd rather just leave that as a display piece than pop it and then have to, like, pour it all out, which it probably, to be honest, I'll probably never open it because I know it's going to get me sick.
How often do you actually pour stuff down the drain, though?
Down the drain?
Yeah. I don't think I ever have.
There's been one time. I won't say, and it's a newer product, craft product.
Oh, I think I might know.
Okay, so let me preface this why this is how I drain poured it.
Do I know?
Maybe you probably do. So we have it here on the bar. I have like 300 whiskeys, so you can't really tell. But some guy was from that area, which is now making it less and less obvious, or it's making it more and more obvious. So he got a pour of it, neat, and I was like, awesome, enjoy it. So, and I hadn't have it yet. So like normally we do 2-ounce pours here, which not a lot of places do.
Yeah.
That's my standard pour, minus like Pappy 23 and Heaven Hill 27 and my Dusties. They're all 1 ounce, which is fair. And so with 2-ounce pours, there's 12 and a half pours. There's always a half ounce extra. So I normally will take that half ounce. Once it gets cracked, I try it and I write it down to my black book. Just so one day some guy asks me, I can be like, this is what I got out of it, or this is what I scored it, yada, yada, yada. So the guy tried it, and I went up to him and was like, so what'd you think of it? He goes, all right, you really want to know what I thought of this bourbon? And I was like, oh, yeah. He's like, okay, think of about a 400-pound man. Actually, you ever seen Austin Powers? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you know the main character, the big guy? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, think of him had just eaten like all-you-can-eat buffet. Then he threw in the biggest dip you could ever think of. He then was taking pulls of the White Dog and spit-filling the barrel. That's what it tasted like. So I was like, it can't be that bad. It can't be that bad. I tried it. And, taste is subjective. Someone tells you what it's going to taste like. You're most likely going to taste that. Yeah, I couldn't get that out of my mind. Yeah, and no crap. He was right. It tasted it. So I tried to put it in the well. I had someone send back a bourbon and Coke. And so I was like, well, we can't.
You just have to eat it at that point.
Oh, I
mean, like, what else can you do?
I think I tried to give it to someone here that worked here. Like some fresh-faced 21-year-old that was going to bourbon and ginger ale it or take it to the frat party. And I bet that it's probably still sitting in a backyard half full down on State Street, to be honest. I haven't had sipped this yet.
This is so different and weird.
Does it honestly taste, though, kind of like some MGP?
No, it definitely does.
It's
a flat MGP.
It is. It doesn't go like, it's not like an AC/DC song. It's definitely more like a Steely Dan song. Like it goes up only a little.
Steely Dan's got valleys and peaks.
They do. I'm a Steely Dan dude, but it's definitely, but like towards the end, it has like this crazy, like, I'll go back to like butterscotch candy.
Oh, for sure.
But like a butterscotch candy that's probably been sitting in your grandma's house for like 20 years.
Thanks, Grammy. Sincerely, that is one of the most unique Dusties I've ever had.
I just don't know how I still have it on the bar. I think I charged like $30 for it.
That's it? For an ounce?
Yeah, maybe 35.
So this has been one big commercial for the Merrick Inn.
Yeah, come on up. Please make reservations. But no, I mean, that's the thing with those Dusties is like I got lucky on them and we put them on the bar. I want people to try them. Yeah, that might make my life harder, which nowadays,
who cares?
Who cares? It's always hard, but. To be honest, this is the most whiskey I've had.
Since the beginning of the pandemic?
Yeah. Probably since one of those, like the night that I had a friend pass and we tore it up for sure.
That was a rough.
That was really rough.
Couple of days, man.
That was really rough. But I also learned that I cannot drink very old Barton, but I drank a lot of it those
just
days.
hands down, you can't drink it.
It's just rough.
It's not good.
But Jesse loved it, and we were like, "Look, we're chugging it. Like that's what's gonna happen."
Sorry, Jesse. Also, sorry to bring it down here towards the end, but
we're going to barrel proof, so it's back up.
So this is the lowest proof Elijah Craig barrel proof of all time.
I saw someone tweeting this yesterday. 118.2. Because I haven't had Elijah Craig barrel proof. We're across from the men's bathroom at Merrick. The first night I ever had Elijah Craig barrel proof, I had the Parker's 13-year wheat whiskey, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I almost brought a sample of that today, but I only had like an ounce of it, and I was like,
you gotta hold on to it.
I got to.
You gotta hold on to it.
Well, it was the first night I ever had it. Me and the bar manager at the time, who taught me a lot about whiskey, we were splitting turns making drinks behind the inside bar and going to the bathroom and just yakking our brains out. Because it was like the hazmat, one of the old style Elijah Craig's. So I'm curious because I like the lower barrel proofs.
I think this is going to be the one that sits on the shelf.
Really? Just because they see it?
Just because it's lower proof.
I mean that's what people thought about that 116 Stag.
I was actually just about to say that, people did still wind up buying the Stag.
But it is just because it is GTS.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's kind of working its way towards that, but I just don't think that Elijah Craig Barrel Proof right now has the clout that something like a GTS does.
No, it doesn't, and that's, to be honest, perfectly fine with me.
Oh, if I can find this any day of the week, I'll be perfectly happy with it.
Man, that's...
So...
It reminds me of some of those old school Elijah Craig picks that were still in the EC12 bottles.
Right. It actually reminds me a lot of turkey.
I could see that.
I
was mid-warming hug.
And the one thing that is kind of throwing me off with it, though, is that there's this, vanilla icing note with it towards the end of the finish. Or beginning of the finish, I guess. Into the palate, into the finish.
See, I still get, the cherry, almost tannins, really top. But then it literally goes, top of the palate and then immediately, goes like a roller coaster straight to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
But then why I think I like Dusty's so much is because of finish. And, that's nose and finish to me, which a lot of people will disagree with me. That's not the important thing. It's more that mid and, the flavor. But I would much rather take something that smells really, really good and fit. I mean, taste obviously important, but
yeah, the finish is the most overlooked part of any whiskey, though.
Because if I'm sipping a bourbon, the point of a bourbon is to sip it and enjoy it. If there's something that's finishing long, I'm not over there taking 5 sips in an hour. I'm really enjoying it. And I think that's a thing, too, that when I do tastings here, I want everything poured and aired for, at minimum an hour before a customer gets here to do part of the tasting.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a thing we don't let, especially even big whiskey nerds, they don't let it breathe as long as it needs to breathe. And a funny story about that, we did our maker's pick, which is still probably one of my favorite picks we've ever done. My dad begged that we put it on the cocktail list, but serve it in a wine glass so that it gets more oxygen enough so that when it hits the table, it's had enough oxygen time to where because that one changed. You'd have it at 15 minutes in, 45 minutes in, it was a monster.
Really?
And I kind of could not stand the idea of putting it in a wine glass. And it's funny, we still bring it up, and that was another jab at Dad. Sorry, I love you. But, I mean, I just really think that the finish, it does get overlooked way too much.
Yeah. But, I mean, that's what keeps you coming back for the next sip, right? Without that, you're just kind of oh, I get it. But if there's the complexity past the palate, that's what hooks people in.
Yeah, and I think the finish also kind of hits you like waves. So that first sip you hit, it goes maybe to high, or it'll go to mid-tide. But then once you finish, you've sat on it and let it sit and finish for a while. Then the second hit, it's another wave. It goes a little farther than the first one, and you're able to pick up a little bit more, or maybe you could pick up something I didn't like that, but I didn't get it on the first one, but the second time, I love that note.
Yeah.
I mean, that stands up to what we've been drinking all night.
It really does.
That's crazy.
I'm so not upset by the fact that it's lower proof because it drinks so well-rounded. No, I can't.
That's why I think a lot of people like MGP stuff, because as soon as you go over that river, and someone that worked up at MGP told me this, there's something about that river, once you go over it, the higher age it goes, the lower the cask strength is. So you've seen some of those Smooth Ambler rye picks from back in the day, which we definitely overlooked completely, that were 107 cask strength 11-year rye, and it's that's awesome.
We would kill for that now.
Oh, that's what that Wilderness Trail rye that we picked. That's what it was, 107 proof at cask when we went to pick it. So I wanted to do, me being a dusty dude, I wanted to do the original barrel proof 107. And I had the stickers ordered, and they're all at my house. When the cases came in, it was 108 proof.
Oh, no.
Until I said, oh, no.
That's when you go in with a Sharpie.
I had the other idea that we did, but...
That was Big League Chew?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, man, but it was funny, the other barrel we were between, it was the only pick that Merrick's done that I was the only person from Merrick. Like, Dad wasn't there, Mom wasn't there. It was... If I messed up, I would have heard about it.
It was your fault.
Well, we went, and I brought a bunch of guys that had never been on picks before or people that have really good relationships with Merrick. The other barrel we tried, we called it the ham sandwich. It literally tasted like a ham sandwich.
That's crazy.
Well, buddies, a California group and some buddies came to pick a barrel the next day, and I was like, you have to try the ham sandwich. Well, of course, they bought the barrel, so now...
Oh, of course they did.
Of course they did. But, yeah, that's why I think Wilderness Trail is because the 5-6 barrels we tried, they were all so different and so individualistic, but then you could see where, like, that they were all Wilderness Trail, and they're right. They had, like, this certain mid thing, but they all just went their own way, and...
I so badly want to do a Wilderness Trail pick for the podcast. So badly want to do it.
The other thing that, the one concern I have is that maybe sometimes they put a little too many barrels into a local market.
That's fair.
Which I know that in a grand scheme of things, when you're trying to go national and everything, you can't think of stuff like that. But I know that there's someone in the final logistics department being like, oh, we're sending 5 barrels to the Lexington market in 1 week. Maybe we should take 2 of those and like hold them another week or something. But they're killing it down there.
Oh, no, they absolutely are.
And it's beautiful down there.
Oh, I think it's the best new campus at the moment.
Yeah, it's hard to say, too. New Riff's got it up there. They're definitely more urban and, like, not as typical.
They have to be.
They have to be, yeah. And they're not as typical, like, when you think, like, Kentucky Distillery. But it's also hard when you go and look at, like, Baker's Mark or Buffalo Trace, which are some of the most beautiful things in the world. But New Riff, I really think, I've been to the Brooklyn Kings County Distillery. Mm-hmm. It kind of gave me that vibe, but you could definitely still tell that it's Kentucky. Like it's not Brooklyn bourbon.
So
thank God.
Not being a peated Scotch fan, have you tried the peated bourbon from Kings County?
I did actually. I tried it up there.
How do you like it?
I had it, and their whiskey is still young, and that was probably 3 summers ago, and to be honest, where we got our whiskey list, I got that idea from Kings County.
Oh, really?
They have a leather book. They had all their cocktails and like history in, and I tried to get the same lady to do it, but the guy was like, oh, she sells vintage books, and then she also makes leather books, and she go here at this time on this corner, and you'll find her. And I was like, dude, I'm from Kentucky.
I've got a flight out tomorrow.
I have no idea what you're saying. I just want to go to a bar and drink High Life and shoot pool and like look at the skyscrapers. Like I have no idea what you're talking about.
I could wax poetic about High Life for a while.
Dude, High Life. I saw it on tap up in Cincinnati, and I called all my distributors. Like, where can I get a High Life keg? Like, I need it. They're like, yeah, they don't distribute it down here.
Oh, they're pulling the Yingling on us.
But I'm like, no. Like, we sell ponies here. They're $2 a pony. Happy hour when we have happy hour, which hopefully will be coming back. $1 a beer, and it's like, but yeah, the High Life. If High Life, Dusty, or barrel proof bourbon, I mean, there's nothing better. There really isn't.
You know what's great is High Life with Turkey 101.
Yeah, I can see
that. It's a great pairing.
I miss like Best Friends Bar where you could go.
You could do a bat and a ball for like.
You could go down there
$10.
and get like a hoot a pole, and you can get a shot of like not just like a shot of. It wouldn't be like just Buffalo Trace. It would be like the tier up.
Yeah.
It'd be like $5, and then you'd see the Rock Hill Farms on the bar and be like, yeah, how much are you pouring for the Rock Hill? And they'd be like, oh, the Rock Hill, yeah, I think it's like 8, and then it's like 12 for a double, and it's like. Okay.
Oh,
Good thing I live on Park Avenue, right up the street.
How about a quadruple?
That was where I celebrated my 21st birthday, and that's
Perfect.
how because it was a Tuesday, in December, the day before Christmas Eve, so no bars are open. So we went to Best Friend's Bar, and I had a triple shot of Rock Hill Farms, and I ended up at Two Keys, and that's where the story will end.
That's
for this part.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
I went real downhill. Rest in peace, Two Keys. I hope they come back, because like that's an institution. Not my scene, and it never really was.
Me
but like,
neither.
I still agree that like
I do a podcast about Bourbon. Do you really think that I would fit in well with the crowd at Two Keys?
the only time I ever went down there, it would be for people watching. But like
That's fair.
those bars on that strip 5 years ago, you could go into like the other bar and be like, Budweiser and Weller Antique, and they'd be like, okay, your tab's $9.54.
Yep.
Or you could go to Paddock and drink, 2014 Stag for $11. Make that a quadruple, please. But, and now a lot of the bars, there's a few bars around that you know where to go to get,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to say it because that's the place I like to go.
Me neither.
But those places I have said they aren't, they've smartened up. Like, not saying smartened up, but realize that they can double, triple their price and still sell it, which as they should.
For sure. Yeah. So I think when the dinners come back, we should talk about doing a podcast
I would love to.
dinner here.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I'm starting to think like, I try to do them in like the falls and then that early part of
perfect.
winter because that's kind of when I have the room to and the ability to, and then hopefully by then, like for about 3 years now, I've been planning a dusty dinner that I've wanted to do, and I've tried to figure it out to where, because I want to do it on the patio. Well, now I have a pool that's now filled in that I'd be able to comfortably put 50, 75 people with, when COVID's not a thing anymore. And I would love to do that because it would be a great way to share some dusty stuff and get it out, and then also just, get people up to Merrick, because I think people also do forget, it's hidden, but
I think that
and it makes it a lot more fun for people.
Yeah. I think that Merrick is it's almost like the long lost sibling to the Beaumont Inn.
Yeah. I mean, to be like, I'll be 100%. I know my grandparents so this is my dad's side. My mom's side owns restaurants. They'd go down to Beaumont to see, because they do it right. And they've been doing it for forever and ever and ever. Yeah. And I hope they do it forever and ever and ever.
I think they will.
I want to do I really, for years, and I want to see if he'd do it, and he probably would. I want to do an innkeeper special barrel pick.
Oh!
And
can I please be a part of that?
Of course.
Thank you.
Just split it with him and just call it the Innkeepers or whatever. And I've always wanted to do one across the street and call it Southside Story, and all his bottles be Capulet and all my bottles be Montague. And I think it ends in translation with Bucky. I don't think it goes up any higher, but also nowadays it's just so hard to find something that you'd actually both people would want to split, but like that'd be so much fun. Because we're all local restaurants and there is a little bit of competition, but in the grand scheme of things, if we could help them and they could help us, especially after this year where we all need to help each other.
Well, and the thing is too, I mean, so I'm, truth be told, have given much more on the podcast to the Beaumont than I have Merrick, which is not the most fair thing in the world because I'm from Lexington.
I mean,
but this is
Dixon, Dexter. I mean, I might have the cooler name. Sorry, Dixon, but I mean, Dixon is Mr. GQ and knows whiskey way more than I do.
But that being said, I would like to find some way to kind of do like a cross-universe thing. Yeah. Where we can all, bring Dixon up here, have you up here as well, have a dinner, have a tasting, have something special and exclusive so that we can kind of do what you were talking about,
Yeah.
promote both places.
And I mean, Dixon, I've known him a very long time, and he's gotten a lot busier since he used to come up. And I'm not saying, you better get your butt up here, Dixon.
I get the feeling he's about to slow down significantly, though.
Well, yeah, and I think he, I know the restaurant business, and I can't imagine him doing Beaumont and doing, enjoy that time with that family, because that's always the biggest thing. Is when I was growing up, Dad would take me to school, and then I'd see him when he took me to school the next day, and he's the best.
He really is.
If I could be what he is, just to the Beaumont, not take whiskey out of it,
Sure.
I'd be happy with that.
Do you want to? Is that something that you're considering with Merrick in the future?
I have, and it's always going to be something,
Sure.
It definitely. I don't feel like, and it's hard too because I've been here this summer. I've been here 14 years. I started here when I was 13. I was hosing off the deck
Just as we were done playing baseball.
Yeah,
I
I literally got a job to buy one of those little go-peds. That's why I got a job here. One of those motor things, and so I could go to anyone's house I wanted to and didn't have to ask for a ride. And I have thought about it, and it's kind of been something, especially this last year. It's kind of pushed me away, but I love it, and it's something I know I am good at. But I don't know. I do really love whiskey, even though I've been very pessimistic with it for a few years now, with all these other reasons why. But I've honestly thought about going to work for a distillery.
I don't think that any of us have not had that thought cross our minds over the past couple of years.
Not as, it would just be hard if I went to, that was the thing, working for a certain distillery, it would be hard to go work for.
Well, that's why I can't do it while I have the podcast.
Yeah, because you'd have to have allegiance. You can't be going out.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you couldn't have really. I would say they wouldn't want you to be constructive against it, criticize it or anything.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a good relationship with a fair few distilleries already, and to pledge allegiance to one over the other, the foundation of the show would crumble.
Yeah,
You know?
and you have to be subjective, especially what you're doing. But I don't know.
I still
thought
have
about
plenty
it.
of opinions.
And then I've thought about going in. I've thought some days maybe I should just go into the sales side for a distillery, being a rep for a certain distillery. But then you fall into the same thing. But yeah, there was one I thought long and hard, and I had an opportunity, and I had a kind of an inn that had been there for many, many, many years.
Sure.
And I kind of just let it go, and some days I really regret it, but I'm still at the point where I don't really know. I love Kentucky, and I love whiskey, and I love the hospitality industry, but I also told myself I can't really make a decision on it until I get back to, normality, which we're close to.
We're getting there. Yeah.
But it just, I've watched, my dad's been here 50 or 40, he started when
Basically
he was 12.
his entire
yeah.
life.
And that does come to the back of my head I'm 27. So if we add it up, that's another 33 years of 70-hour weeks. Oh gosh. But it'd break my heart to see this place close. It's my house. I've spent probably more time here than I've ever spent at home, or I grew up here. So
Yeah.
it's a home. It's a beautiful place, and
that's exactly the sentiment that you get from Dixon.
Oh, 100%.
You know?
And every time you walk into the Beaumont, you can feel the legacy of the Deadmans, and just they know hospitality. And this is going to sound crazy, my favorite thing going there when I was a kid was being able to go into the front desk where you check in and grab me a big old red apple and eat it. That was the coolest thing to me as a kid.
I also love that this is supposed to be an episode where we talk
About Merrick.
and
Sorry,
it's
Dad.
devolved into talking about the Beaumont. But having this conversation has really made my wheels turn, and I do want to find some way to incorporate supporting Merrick into the show sometime in the future. Like I said, doing a tasting, a dinner, or something
Man, it
here.
does not taste like Maker's at all.
That's a pick from I think it's a hotel up in Seattle.
Below 110 proof for a Maker's pick. I don't really see that a lot all the time.
So this is from the same hotel that the Beatles stayed at when they were up in Seattle.
Okay.
And there's like a real famous photo of them like hanging out the window, waving at people.
Makes you think of Walker, and he's like, yeah, and I'm John Lennon from the Beatles. And, hey, Paul McCartney. Yeah, Paul McCartney from the Beatles.
But this was gifted to me by a listener. It was a victim of COVID. It didn't actually ever make it to the hotel, to their restaurant.
These picks are sleepers.
They really are.
Like that's how I would always get people with ours, because people just think Makers and they're like, oh, it's sweet.
It's Makers.
Put some ginger ale on it. But I remember I had the flight that blew me out of the water. These people that I know from a bourbon group came up, and it was their 40th birthday. And I had a bottle on the Dusty list that was birth year. So they came up, had that, and they all had a pour of that. And they said, well, we want to do a Dusty flight. I said, let me take care of that. I got you. I have a 60 to 67, one of those bowling pin Jim Beam decanters. Not the white one, one of the 8 years. Mm-hmm. It was that, Russell's Reserve 2002, and our Maker's pick. Blinded it to him. Said, take whatever. They eat dinner, they have the pours, they let them sit for a while, then they go back to it. And I come up to them like, so what did you think? And they're like, well, this one's the winner. Hands down. This one's okay. This one's really, really good too. And I'm like, well, the really, really good one's Russell's Reserve 2002. The one you all didn't like's the Jim Beam. That's our Maker's pick. And they all went, shut up, shut up. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. And I've done, like, that flight, I was like, proven. And then Walmsley came up one night. He had this, JPS 18, and something else. This came in second to JPS 18. And I told him, and I think he's bought like 6. I had one bottle left, and I messaged him and said, I have one left. Do you want it? He's like, I'll be there in 10 minutes.
Was that was the Weller Killer? Is that pick?
Yeah, that's what he calls the Weller Killer.
Yeah.
And then some other guy, I have a sample that I almost brought today that I think it's the cork and bottle pick of this.
Oh, snap.
Which that got a review. If you look it up, someone reviewed it saying that it blew William LaRue Weller that year out of the water. So that at first you look at that as one of us, you're like, are you serious?
Yeah, come on.
But the guy that gave it to me knows old granddad, works for Jim Beam, and has had to have the opportunity to try like old granddad.
Right.
He's like, man, this tastes like National Distiller's old granddad,
That's
or Old
so
Taylor.
Cool.
And I was like, dude, that's my wheelhouse.
Come on, man.
No, it does.
Yeah.
But also,
well, it's more of a come on. Like you're gonna.
You could look over at the bar top here and see I'm a little biased. Merrick definitely has a great relationship with Makers.
Yeah, of course.
Bill, we did a dinner with Bill, I have some videos of him telling a story of Pappy giving him a shot of very, very old Fitz 12. And it's one of the funniest stories ever. I have it on video, and it's like one of my favorite things in the world. And then all these bottles we have above the bar, they were out at Murray's, which was our old restaurant. And when we closed Murray's, Dad took them home and saved them all and saved all these display boxes. Well, it was like 5 years ago, my dad sees Bill at some event and says, Bill, I have all your bottles. And some of these were like using the Esquire mag. Some of them are one-of-one bottles. Bill goes up to my dad and goes, what do you mean? He goes, these bottles are out at Murray's that you gifted. He goes, oh, no. They're your bottles now.
Oh.
They're all yours. I don't want any one of them back. And we did that. We did our release with him, and then Rob came up too. And I love the Samuels. They're great. And like, people want to hate on Makers, but it's a staple.
I have been kind of circling around it, of course, over the past couple of years. But to be able to do a show with the Samuels and one with the Russells, those are like the two bigger goals I have.
Oh man, there's
and like I'm afraid that the time to sit down with Jimmy has kind of passed a little bit just because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I think that to get Bill and Rob, would not be a big deal at all.
Bill and Rob, and the just because at first, I've known makers my whole, my dad's a big makers guy.
Yeah.
And
so is my dad, actually.
And I've always known makers, but I never knew the story of the Samuels.
Yeah.
Well, just learning Bill, they live next door to, it's just, they have such an awesome story. And people like to hate on them because, they're probably some of the best marketers in bourbon, and still to this day, you can look, they own the drip wax.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, that's crazy.
For a reason, too.
They sued Elmer and Rob, Bill, and I've always heard the story that Al, Bill, Jimmy, Elmer, and Booker were all, and then Ed Foote, all those dudes were all buddies. They're all the same graduating class.
They were that the Illuminati of bourbon during the 70s and 80s when it wasn't popular, and they all were going out and promoting it and trying to get it back on the market. And they all
weren't in competition with each other. They all were look, we all have a seat at this table. Let's all enjoy it, and let's all share each other's stuff.
And that's what brought about the resurgence, I think.
100%.
Of bourbon, and really truly kicked off the boom as well, was once you realized that everybody was kind of in for the greater good, then the positive vibes picked up, and
I just
everybody
wish I
was
could have
there
met
for it.
Elmer one more. I met him when I was 20. And
Did you really?
I bought a Buffalo Trace bottle that's got the buffalo nickel on it. I was not of age at the Buffalo Trace gift shop at the time. But I met him. He just signed the bottle, whatever. I just wish that I could have asked him, because Elmer's my guy. Elmer's that's the first time I had Elmer, I knew this isn't just Kentucky gentlemen chugging from the bottle and pulling a 2-liter afterwards. This is wine. There's.
It is so funny that you say that.
I would have loved to hear stories of it, just hear him just talk. Or Booker.
Oh, see, that's the other thing too. Is I'm very thankful, of course, for the podcast and when I got into it, and I hit it right before there was this huge influx of bourbon media.
Yeah.
And so, we still have a really good listenership. We still have a very devoted following and everything. But I do wish that I were just a couple years older.
Same.
So that I could have gotten to meet and hang out with these people and, be able to appreciate it a little bit more. But it's so funny to me that you bring up Elmer being the guy that you look to, and his bourbon being what you hold in such high standards. But this is where I first had Elmer T. Lee.
Here? Really? I didn't know that.
I didn't know that you had such an affinity for him either.
Oh, but I mean, I liked him because he was no frills. He didn't give a rat's ass about marketing or anything. And I bet
the bottle shows.
I bet he'd be pissed to know that he has his own bourbon brand. And that's what he reminds me of my grandmother a lot.
Yeah.
He could have easily stepped away from Buffalo Trace when he could have easily. And my grandma at 73 was still here first person, last person, and she'd be at 73 carrying a table from the basement, and you'd be like, "Give me that damn table." And she'd look at you and go, "Do you want to still be employed?" And that's kind of, I saw that in Elmer,
that's
and just and the cool story, the Blanton story about what he did for Blanton, even though Blanton's I don't want to hire you.
Yeah.
I thought that was awesome. And it was more probably to him, but
yeah, of course.
I've always liked him. I've always liked Harlan's story too, because Harlan isn't one of those dudes that
he's not the showboat.
He's not the showboat, but he knows his stuff.
Yeah, he absolutely
and
does.
Him talking, he scares me though sometimes.
Well, I think that with the advent of Connor O'Driscoll at Heaven Hill, we're kind of seeing a return to form with master distillers in that way. that they're not there to be show ponies, and they're actually there to get the job done. And having spoken with Bernie over the past couple of weeks too,
he knows his stuff.
But he's also told me that they have really, really upped their production.
Oh,
at Heaven Hill since Connor's taken over. And so instead of going out and, trying to show off and he's a hard worker, and he's trying to do his best for the brand as well. So hopefully that means in a few years we're going to have more bourbon, but
I think so. Because let's think about it. When did the bourbon boom really start? 4 years ago? I would have been... No, probably before that.
I was going to say probably more like 7 or 8.
Let's just say 5 to be safe.
Sure.
Okay, well, here in 2 years, Weller Antique, that's 7 year. We should be having a lot of laid barrels down to that. Or then you're 3 years away from a 10-year product, supposedly. I would say we're getting to the point where they've started realizing, okay, we need to lay more barrels down.
No, they definitely have. And I mean, that shows in how many warehouses they've built over the past couple of years as well.
Man, Buffalo Trace is massive.
They've doubled.
Easily.
At least doubled.
That eagle's nest on the hill, that thing is so cool.
It's beautiful. That's one of my favorite things in the world, to go up there. And
oh, yeah. They were like, we went on one pig. They were like, do you want to go up there? And I was like, yeah, can we walk to the top floor of the Rick House? She was like, yeah, why would we take you up there? And
we can go one floor up.
I was like, all right, well, let's go.
This one goes to 11.
But I really want to do a Willet barrel really bad.
Do you?
So bad. Not because of the whole people thinking oh, I wear a Rolex, I drink Willet. But no, just because I find myself gravitating to brands that are kind of emulate family owned.
Yeah, of course.
Operated. That's awesome. In Kentucky, I would love to, right. If I could have my whole back bar just be Kentucky bourbon, or to be honest, more people that are family owned and operated, I'd do it tomorrow.
Sure.
That's what I like about Willet, and I've always wanted to do a Heaven Hill one as well, but there's just a certain cheat code or algorithm that I don't know to get allocation. I just don't know what it is. But
I was about to say, you look like you got about one more in you.
Yeah, and I'll go back to that Eagle Rare. I don't know what's... If I had a size 18 up there, we'd drink it, but I've never had one since I've worked here.
Really?
No.
Just, that's really bizarre to me.
We don't get... It just, I get...
I guess it's part of the distribution thing.
It is, but, they take care... Last year, this was the first year I had an Eagle Rare since before I bartended or bar managed. We had one when I was 13 bussing here. But I also now too have taken over ordering and kind of know what I can do, but it's all really weird. How
it's
that
all about
works.
Distribution and whatnot.
Yeah, and it's all weird, especially when Sazerac owns all these brands and they say okay, buy Sazerac, you'll get better Sazerac allocation. Yeah. Well, it's just weird when 1792, they just switched distributors.
Yeah.
Well, if I order 1792, does that still count for my how does another distributor's product help my other distributors let's say my Pappy allocation? If I'm buying 1792, which technically used to help, does it still help?
You've still got to buy Wheatley.
Oh, to be honest, I'll support. Wheatley's a great vodka for the price, and we use it in cocktails, and we do really well with it. But yeah, there's they never there's not a sheet where it's you do this, you get this.
That's how it's always been told to us though. Is that the store or the rep comes in and they're like, you've got to sell this many cases of Wheatley vodka, and then maybe you'll get an Ancient Age. You know what I mean? That's been the general understanding, but I mean, I don't think that's a sustainable business model.
No, and I mean, I think it was 3 years ago, my rep goes, oh, we found these in the warehouse. And I was like, she said, we have Ancient Age. And I was like, yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah.
Thinking it was going to be like 10-star. For some reason, it got distributed to Kentucky.
But no.
No, it was Ancient Age 10 year from 90, a 93 bottle. Or no, a 2003 bottle. And I'm like, wait, you all found those in the warehouse? I'll pay you $500 to just let me run the warehouse. And if I find another one, let me keep it. Because, like, they came in at, like, wholesale price of Ancient Age.
Yeah, exactly.
So I called her that minute was like, yeah, I'll take 5, like, whatever I can get of that.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, we just got lucky and found that. So there's places like, when you see some of these new bars open up that have like crazy vintage list or crazy list, there's a lot more of it sitting out than we really think. But that also then makes me think, like, how is the market going the way it is? Because if you didn't see, Sotheby's just had an auction 2 days ago. It was all one seller. He had 10 Red Hook Ryes from Linnell's. He had 10 of them, and they went for like no more than 20. And I've seen them sell for 33,000. He had 10 of those, had a bunch. He had like Hirsch 16s, and the reserve was set at $500. I bid on so much H&H, thinking, oh no, I'm gonna have to drive to Washington D.C. because that's the lowest they'll ship it to.
Yeah.
I almost won an H&H for $225. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And I honestly, I called a buddy of mine, who's a money guy. I was like, so do you think it's worth it to, like, sign up for a student loan and, like, just buy, like, 5 Linnell's Red Hook Ryes and just, like, sit on them? And he was like, Dexter, I think you're kind of crazy. And I was like, but they were all some one dude's collection. So, like, but
there's stuff out there, yeah.
There's stuff out there. The thing that scares me about the market is I think there's a lot of market manipulation and shill bidding.
Oh, that's
been my fear since day one of joining. Because, like, the groups work different than a lot of other hobbies.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever seen a hobby where, okay, you pay first, and if it gets to you, first delivery, then it's your responsibility. But, like, let's say it doesn't, then they have to, like, that's not how any other hobby works. And I've just always been worried of, especially like some private group does a barrel pick. They post it in a national group. Well, nobody knows your private group of 200 dudes, so they don't know who's in it. So then some guy bids your bottle up to $700. You sell it to him. Well, you never have to prove that actually sold. So that's what worries me about the market, especially now. But I don't do anything with it. Like, I have no... With the vintage spirits law, I can kind of get into the market, but my whole philosophy on Dusties or bottles of bourbon is I'm going to price it to where I can kind of keep it.
Sure.
But if I sell it all out, I'm not mad.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go buy a $2,500 bottle I have to charge $250 an ounce for, and then here in 5 years, if I go belly up, I'll get to drink it and be really angry about it.
Yeah, sure.
But
collecting's weird, man.
I don't know. When did that become... I swear that's the last, like, year and a half, like, where I'm a whiskey collector. And there's always been whiskey collectors, but when was it, like, predominantly whiskey collecting?
Truth be told, I feel like people started noticing when Neat came out.
So I haven't seen it.
I mean, you should. It's great.
I want to watch it.
It's great. But, like, I think that's when it became a viable thing or something that people started taking a little bit more seriously.
I did see a Facebook article or ad the other day, and it was like, the vintage whiskey and spirits market is up 529% over the markets of vintage watches and vintage cars and everything. And I'm like,
but who's regulating that?
You all have a lot of liquor licenses or what?
We're trying to get doxxed by Facebook.
But I saw that, and it makes sense, though. I mean, I've seen the market go up, but...
Even still.
Do I ever think now I'm at the point where I'm like, the bubble's never going to pop. We're at Pokemon cards at this point.
I don't think it will either.
And that's
anymore.
A lot of people. I had this argument with someone the other day. They're like, "Well, you can get '80s baseball cards for pennies," and I'm like, "Okay, well, they made millions of baseball cards.
There's only so many bottles of whiskey."
But like Saz 18 for this year made 1,200 bottles for it.
Yeah, exactly.
But that doesn't make it. Still is weird how a Saz 18 where there's only 1,200 of them, but like a 1990 CGF where they probably made like 100,000 of them or something. Why is a CGF still more than a Saz 18? There's no determining factor to the market.
That's what I'm saying. Like, there's no regulation in trying to set specific prices and whatnot. But.
And like that's the weird thing too is there's the secondary market, then you have the online market, which is like 200% higher. It's really gray right now. And like,
I would like for it to slow down a little bit.
It will.
So that people can kind of, gather their bearings and everything. But I would just really like to see Dusty Turkey
go back to like 250, 300
exactly.
a bottle.
But it's like $475, $525 at the moment. And I'm so frustrated by that.
I saw my dream bottle the other day sell for $16,000.
Oh, no.
I asked the dude, he had an open one. I said, well, how much for a 2-ounce sample? It's the No Chemist Willet, which is supposedly, and I don't know if it is true, but I believe it is true. It's an 18-year, 142.6 proof Stitzel, which makes me like perk up.
Okay, all
I
right.
said, so how much you want for a 2-ounce sample? It's like, I'd have to have $1,100. And I was like,
excuse me?
I honestly thought about being like, all right, well, I'll give you, how about a 2012 Thomas Handy straight up for a 2-ounce sample? And then I was like, Dexter?
Think about this.
But, I mean, I can't imagine. That's my dream.
Yeah, of
Or
course.
drinking National Distiller straight out of the barrel, but, that won't happen.
Story for another day.
If I get a time machine, there's 2 places I'm going. I'm going to 78. I'm seeing Van Halen on their first tour with Sabbath, right when the first album came out. I'm seeing Some Girls tour, because that's my favorite Stones album. UK wins a national title. Steelers win a Super Bowl. Grease comes out, which is, it's one of my favorites besides Star Wars. And then I'm going to 83. So I can buy up just crazy National Distillers, crazy Stitzel, and go see Van Halen at the US Festival and drink some Jack Daniels with them.
I didn't realize how well planned out all of this was in your head.
78 to 83, like if I could be 21 years old for those 4 or 5 years, that's where I'm going. And I'm literally just coming back with like tons of old granddad being like, hey.
The TARDIS is like wobbling as it goes through the... No.
Oh, dude, I don't think I'd make it back.
Probably not, partying with Van Halen in 78.
Or Sabbath at 78. Between Ozzy and David Lee Roth. I mean, I'd like to try at least,
It's a 2-week experiment.
So when Eddie passed, 2 days after he passed, I got that. And I cracked a 83 Jack Daniels that I had. And man, dude, those old Jack Daniels. Green apple and just like...
Really?
That I got a lot of it, honestly, out of this. Like, it took me back to that. And they're all 90 proof instead of, I think they're 80 proof now.
Yeah.
Is
it 80 or 86?
I think it's 80 proof, but like I haven't drank regular Jack since. I think the only time I drank Jack, I was out of the country and I went to some bar and
out
it was
of necessity.
Like, they were like, we have Jack and we have Jim Beam. And I was like, I'll take Jack Daniels then. I can't do Jim Beam.
Oh, man. We're going on
3 hours now?
Over 2 of recording, but I've been here a while. We should probably wrap up, don't you think?
Yeah, I think
I got to go eat dinner.
Yeah, I'm glad I brought this pizza because if I didn't bring this and eat like 4 of the slices before you got here, I hadn't eaten anything all day. And I was like, I think I'm going to eat something before he gets here.
I had leftovers from Pasta Garage for lunch, so...
Pasta Garage is so... Have you been to that new Italian place in town? Italics?
No, I've not yet.
I really want to go.
Yeah.
But I'm nervous because I worked at a 5-course Italian place and out in Colorado, and so I'm like,
You're going to be super critical?
yeah. And that's why I don't go out to eat a lot, too, is I'm super critical.
That's fair.
Or I'm like, this person...
Why go anywhere else when you can just have something you love?
People say that,
here?
and like I literally have like the last 5 meals I've gotten from here are like chicken fingers, chicken wings, sides, and fried chicken.
Grouper fingers.
And I'm like, man, I don't want to look in the mirror anymore.
That's how I felt like halfway through the pandemic, and it just did not get any better.
Well, I think that's what also helped me is I stopped drinking.
Yeah.
So I lost a little bit of weight, but then like I started just being like, oh, we'll just cook like this big meal at my house, and then realizing it's me and my brother, and I'm eating the whole meal by myself. But yeah, dude, this has been like honestly a breath of fresh air.
I'm happy to hear that, and I really do hope that people come from out of town. We've got plenty of Kentucky listeners as well.
Well, yeah, come see me.
Come and visit the Merrick Inn.
Yeah, to be honest, come see me. Hopefully here in like another 2 months, I'll have more picks on the shelf, and hopefully be able to loosen up some bookends so that the bar seems a little bit more stocked. I say that while I'm looking at a bar that has no room on it, but
I was gonna say it doesn't look too bad back there.
I have like 50 I could bring down. I just don't have room for it. But yeah,
man. Regardless, everybody come see Dexter. Come see the Merrick Inn, and maybe I'll swing by as well and do that.
And then be on the lookout. I'm going to start posting stuff to the Facebook, Instagram for Merrick about upcoming releases, upcoming dinners. Pretty much it won't be till the fall just because I get to a point
of course,
where I'm going to try to get this place at 60% packed, which is kind of an oxymoron. But, in the fall, I've started sending emails, and I do have a charity barrel coming out around Thanksgiving. Ooh. And whatever the patron saint of Thanksgiving is a reminder of what kind of barrel I'll be getting. So be looking for that.
All right. Well, come check out Merrick Inn. Dexter, good hanging out with you, buddy.
Perry, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Want to say thank you again to Dexter for allowing me to come into his family's inn and wax poetic for a while about just bourbon. Man, it was just a good time. We just had a great time hanging out and drinking and chatting about the world of bourbon. Just made me feel good for a little while. So, hey, I wanted to throw a couple of tips and bits out there before we wrapped up. What have I been doing? A couple weeks ago, I mentioned that I was playing through the Zelda games. I'm at the moment playing through A Link to the Past, which I love. It's been so much fun, and I'm looking forward to beating it here probably within the next week. I feel like I've been reading something really good. Oh, there's a new... See, this is all just where people get kind of lost with the nerdy stuff that I recommend, but there's a new Crime Syndicate series going on at DC Comics that I've really, really enjoyed. There's only 3 issues out so far, but it's pretty fantastic. And I'm recording this on May the 4th. So it's May the 4th be with you day, Star Wars Day. So I got to recommend, of course, the Star Wars movies. That's a dumb recommendation. People love Star Wars, right? And if you've not seen Star Wars, it's because you lived the Star Wars. So check it out, I guess. Go check out a movie series that's been around for 50 years, almost 45 years at this point. So yeah, that does it for this week's episode. If you want to follow me on social media, I am at pritter1492 on all channels. If you want to follow the show itself, it's at My Bourbon Pod on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. You can leave us a 5-star rating and review in your podcatcher app. As I said at the top of the show, you can find all of our apparel and merchandise at bourbonshop.threadless.com, except for our Glencairns, which you can find at whiskeyambitions.com. I say this is my bourbon drinking glass on them. They're super, super cool. We love them. You can send questions or comments to thisismybourbonshop@gmail.com. Had to catch my breath there for just a second. You can leave a voicemail for us for our infrequent barrel ring segment at 859-428-8253. I go live every Thursday on youtube.com/thisismybourbonpodcast. As of recording, we are just a couple shy of 800 subscribers, which means that we are getting super, super close to 1,000. which is nuts. I know 200 sounds like a lot, but we're going to keep pushing for it. I think we can do it. I think if I wind up in another situation where I do really well in Matt Madness, then that should be a pretty easy goal that we can achieve. But thank you all so much if you're here because of Matt Madness, if you're here because you're just a new subscriber on YouTube. Thank you. I really do appreciate that. It means a lot to me. And I'm still trying to work on doing more YouTube content. Not going as easily as I had hoped that it was going to, but that's just kind of the way of things when you're a new dad. So otherwise, you can also support the show at patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast for as little as $1 a month. $5 a month gets you exclusive audio content, including the pregame chats and the last call, which come out before and after every episode. I am many weeks behind on a new last call, but I'm going to try to pick that back up here over the next couple of weeks. That does it for this week's episode. Next week, we've got some lovely folks from the Rabbit Hole Distillery on the podcast. All right. Thank you all so much for listening. As always, we'll see you next week. But until then, I'm Perry, and this is My Bourbon Podcast.